So I'm Paula Davis, and I'm VP of Learning Product Strategy for SAI Global. We're going to spend the next 40 to 50 minutes talking about really the future of compliance and ethics training.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Dan Demerit. I am Director of Business Conduct for ITT Corporation. In that role, I'm responsible for code of conduct, for corporate investigations, for education, compliance education, and also for their anti-corruption program up there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Yapchai. I'm Chief Compliance Officer for Whirlpool Corporation. We have 100,000 employees in over 50 countries globally. And perhaps I'm about to be your new best friend. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I have 200 passes to give out every year for people who want to buy products at a discount. So just connect with me and then send me an email and say, hey, I need a link, and I'll be happy to send you one. Please don't pay full price.
Very nice. Good morning. My name's Seth Rice. I'm the director of the Office of Ethics Compliance at Kennametal. So I'm not here to offer any discounts or anything like that, but Kennametal's a 76-year-old public company based in Pittsburgh. We help people make things, so we sell a lot in the automotive, aerospace, and otherwise. About 12,000 employees globally, and my role is to try to help lead the corporation's initiatives around compliance and integrity. So happy to be here today.
Thank you. Okay, so perhaps before we look forward to what we see coming in the world of compliance training, I'd like to hear from the panel perhaps a bit of a look backwards. What's changed for you? What is different about your programs today than what you were doing, let's say, 2-3 years ago?
Sure, I guess I'll take a stab at that. So, to me, compliance is such a dynamic area. You probably already all know that. So, 2 to 3 years ago is like maybe 10 or 20 years ago in the compliance world.
It's like dog years.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. So it multiplies. I would say in our organization, so I joined Kennametal almost 4 years ago now. So maybe my timeline fits with this question, but it was much more command and control. It was much more rules based. It was much more, you got to complete a certain number of trainings per year. Here's 5,000 policies you need to know and be accountable for. So that was the environment, and as we'll get into going forward, we've worked very hard to change that because I think that's not how people work, nor is it really effective in terms of how people view things from a values-based standpoint. So I'll let others maybe chime in on that.
I would say, so how many of you feel like I do that 5 years ago your function had much more of a policing authority tone? Show of hands. We're going to catch you if you're bad, and don't do bad things like that. I feel like that was more of the focus, heavy-handed, and now it's much more of a culture-oriented approach and a feeling of pride and a place that people want to be part of compliance, instead of being so worried when we show up.
I would say similarly, it used to be we were not cognizant at all about who we were instructing or how we were instructing. It was just a matter of we had X number of courses, we had so many topics we had to cover, and we were just pushing them out. And I think with our greater awareness to culture within the organization and also on a global presence, right? How do you communicate? What do you communicate? When do you communicate? That's changed everything. And we had in 2012, we did kind of a world tour. We went to a lot of facilities around the entire world. I remember in China talking about respect, one of the values. I think who has respect as one of your corporate values? Right? Probably everybody, right? So when you're in that conversation in China and you start talking about respect, when we talk about respect, we're talking about treating people courteously, kind of doing the right thing in order to make sure that they're feeling like they're valued, right? When you're having that conversation in China, it's a much different conversation. It's about hierarchy. It's about how long have you been in the organization? What position do you have, right? And so I think the more that we've at ITT, we've begun to rethink some of those fundamental definitions so that we approach the words more carefully and approach the content more carefully.
And I think it's very interesting that each of you have used the words values, culture, and engagement, which and just sitting at our booth and just hearing conversations as people walk by. These are probably three of the most used words that I've heard at this conference. And I think the objective of a kind of values-based, very engaging approach to driving a culture of compliance is laudable. But I think what perhaps we're all grappling with here is how. How do you do that? I mean, can you share some examples of how you're actually putting that into practice? Perhaps we could start with Dan.
Yeah. When we look at compliance training generally, I look at it in the 3 C's. I look at commercial, context, and coverage, right? And what do I mean by that? I'll talk a little bit about each as we kind of go through the session. We're really talking about, because the workforce is changing so rapidly and there's so much competition for their attention, we treat our code now really as a commercial for the other compliance topics, okay? So when we launched our code, we launched it in really 3 short, high-paced segments with a lot of energy that really didn't instruct on any given code topic. But what they did is they got people interested in going to the code and finding out about what was in the code. We started that actually with almost a movie trailer sort of approach, building some interest up front. The new code is coming, kind of leaking some of the content and some of the video, that sort of thing, and really built interest way before the code was out there. So when we finally got to the point where the code was released and the original code training came out, we ended up with 100% of our workforce participating in that training, both direct and indirect, 100% around the globe. So first time ever for us.
At Whirlpool, it's a really strong culture-based company, and frankly stronger than any other company that I've been in. And so it's really easy for me to get employee engagement when we push the culture trigger. And what's been amazed by me is how powerful it is. It's amazing to me how powerful it is, that people's emotions and pride and that they want to be a part of this company. And it goes really beyond brand recognition, right? It's your recruiting tool. It's your retention tool. And it's just amazing that when you use those aspects, how powerful it can be. And I'll give a little bit of demonstration in a little bit. You guys see some props up here, and I'll talk more about it in a bit.
Yeah. So just to build off of that, one of the things that when we think about engagement, you have to get people invested, right? So maybe building on what comment Dan made earlier, the training and communication and your policies and your code, it can't be disconnected from the business, right? So people are there fundamentally to, advance business objectives, to feed their family, to hopefully do right in the community, but you have to connect the dots with people, and to me that's the engagement challenge. So if you're just talking to them about Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or harassment or conflicts of interest without putting it in the context of how it matters to them, how it matters to the company, how it makes their plant more efficient and profitable, maybe how it allows the corporation to meet its objectives. And there's always a balance, of course. You don't want to muddy the waters too much between compliance and business, but you have to be there. So as an example that Kennametal has started doing that's been very effective over the past year is we have these what we call business practice summits, right? So these are regional meetings. We have the executive team is there and the regional management team is there. And it's all about how do we connect the dots between what we're trying to do from a commercial, organizational, personnel perspective and compliance and integrity. And what we found is it seems like really simple, right, that you would do that, but it was a miss in our organization. We found people leave these sessions much more aware of how, if I pay attention to the values in the code of conduct, how does that move the needle, on the stock price of the company, the success of my facility. So I think when you think about engagement, I would submit to you that's a good way to look at it.
Right, and just one more data point. We actually had one of our regional leaders, unsolicited, tell the rest of the executive committee that after having some compliance events conducted in her region, she saw a lift in employee engagement, both in her scores and just anecdotally noticing it, and that she had nothing else to attribute it to other than the events that we had done.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
I think the other tie to culture, I think often in ethics and compliance, we may feel that we're alone, right? That we have this responsibility to drive an ethics and compliance message to the organization at large. I think if you look at culture, and I'm talking about corporate culture now, not local culture, there are a lot of people at the organization at ITT that are invested in driving the culture, right? So we've got the learning and development group, we've got senior leadership, we've got comms. So we're doing a lot of work now to partner with them, right? And make certain that the messages that we're delivering from an ethics and compliance training perspective are aligned with the messages that are being delivered by comms and the messages that are being delivered for professional development and any leadership discussion. And that all of that then is wrapped in what we're trying to drive as a corporate culture. I've come to a lot of conferences for a lot of years, and people talk about make sure you build those relationships. I hadn't really realized until like the last year or so how much power there is in doing that, and take the time to do that. It's really, really worthwhile.
Okay, I'd like to introduce technology into the conversation. We are talking about the future of compliance training. I think inevitably that turns us to thinking about enabling technologies and how technology can perhaps be used to help us in our objectives to drive ethical behaviours and to drive a culture of compliance. I think somewhat disappointingly, our experience in reality has been the opposite. I'm not sure technology has always really helped us. It's been the kind of necessary evil of e-learning rather than technology as a real enabler. Do you think that's going to change? Are you seeing new things emerge now, new things that you can do with technologies that might make that shift and might really help us in those objectives?
Yeah. I'd like to ask the group first. How many of you feel like you have a budget to really leverage technology? Good, a few of you do. Great. How many of you feel like you're using more free resources that are available and you're being scrappy about it?
I'm going to include myself in that.
Absolutely.
I have put myself in that bucket. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's a good data point. Do you want to share yours before I do that?
Yeah. So fundamentally, I see the technology, I see the opportunity of technology, right? That's really what it comes down to. You can't any longer just do the LMS type training because you're not going to reach the audiences that you need to reach. I realized a few years ago that when we look at millennials and my kids, that they can take a lot of data, right, and in a rapid fire type of methodology and assimilate that, right? Whereas the training that I'm used to is, sit down, do the 20 minutes, take the test, you're done, right? And so we're trying to, where we can, transform much more to that type of an environment. We still have to do the 20-minute stuff on certain topics, but by and large, where we can just communicate, that's really where we're getting the benefit, right? So, for instance, I was in Korea last week, right? And while I was there, the president was removed from office, right? So there's a headline in the paper. So I take a picture of the headline that shows that she's removed, and I just put a quick caption under that says, conflicts of interest are real. right? Because ultimately that's why she was removed, and push that out through Snapchat. And you get 500 or 600 people reading that, right? And you don't know necessarily that they do anything with it, but you've got a message out there.
Yeah, it's so much easier, like you're saying, to make things go viral now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That you don't have to have a formal communication plan. It's something really in the moment, right? And there's already momentum because people are reading the news, so you're sort of riding the wave, riding the tail of that.
And there's so much content there. You know, anytime we see a corruption scandal, if it's Russia or China or Latin America, we'll package that. We'll put, some sort of an email together and push it out just to the region. We're not going to send that globally, but we want that region to know about it.
So I have a question for the group. How many of you have increased the frequency of the messaging you put out but decreased the duration in the last year?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that, what I found, and we talked a little bit on the prep call about millennials versus others. What I found is I think everybody's time is so divided, whether you're a millennial or you're on the brink of retirement. There's so much being thrown at everybody personally, professionally, messaging. So we've really, this is a journey we're continuing down. We're looking at how do you make it more bite-sized, make it more edgy, make it more impactful. So, and it's interesting. I've done a lot of work with some of my consumer products companies, technology, who some of the things I've looked at that they do, I'm like, well, that might be a little bit too far over the line for an old line manufacturing company, but it grabs people's attention. Maybe it's 2 to 5 minutes, maybe less. Just go out onto YouTube. There's some very impactful videos. You take a topic like texting and driving. Well, if you can YouTube that. So there's some very impactful videos, and it grabs people's attention. So that's something we've really pushed on. And again, I don't think it's unique to millennials in my experience.
The other advantage we're finding from something like Snapchat is you'll get people that respond, right? And if you can identify those individuals who consistently respond, as you go to a location, talk to those people because they're engaged, right? And they want to be more engaged.
They're champions, we
right?
call them.
So pick up on those people.
I'm showing my age and my lack of Snapchat ability, but how do you push that out to your employees? It works like Twitter, right? You have to have followers.
Yeah. So we've published the, I don't know what you call it, a tag, handle, thank you, whatever. Yeah. You can tell I don't even know what it is, and I can do it. So it's like,
in other companies, like we have something internally called Whirlpool 360 that is the same sort of social media element. So I think you have to find whatever it is in your organization. In Latin America and China, they tend to use WhatsApp more. So I think whatever vehicle that fits you.
Well, like you, I was terrified at first. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this. But it's not difficult. That's really the bottom line.
And your marketing team will be really happy to help you out. They're all young millennials. They'll get a kick out of teaching you something new. Yeah.
We have some more.
Question about the learning platforms. I think the technology is discussing has shortcomings that we're all very well aware of. To what extent have you really focused on creating customized content, which I think, get the duration issue or are you found outside platforms that you think have innovative ways of presenting content, not sort of sleep-inducing, off-the-shelf content that is oftentimes the default.
Is that my cue, Paula?
Sorry. I think this is.
Yeah.
Right, we put a platform out there. The platform actually might be really useful if you can come up with interesting content.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, Kim's got a great example of what she has done with kind of combining technology, innovation, and some great content. So, I mean, maybe you could share that.
yeah, thanks for that setup. I did not talk to him in advance. So when I first started doing compliance, my mission was to take the grown out of compliance, right? Because I was the employee before I started doing that. I was like, oh my God, okay, I got to sit through another slide presentation. I got to sit through another video. It's not really teaching me anything real that I didn't already know, especially having a legal background. So what can I do different? And part of the reason I joined Whirlpool was their willingness to really be creative in this sort of stuff. So we all talked about this in advance, and we wanted to practice what we preach. And so we decided to give you a little bit of a taste here. So I might irritate the video people because I'm not going to move around, and I'm not going to be behind the mic. So I want you to all close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to envision you're at a conference at Whirlpool, you're sitting, it's late in the day, and you see the next thing on the agenda says Whirlpool Speakeasy, okay? And you ride an elevator down, and the doors open up, and you see a smoke-filled room with jazz Prohibition-era music playing. Okay, open your eyes. So, the team here forgot their flapper costume. But you would have someone greeting you at the door saying, welcome to the Whirlpool Speakeasy, right? And handing you a prop. You look like pearls here. 1, 2, 2, right? And asking you to partake. And then you'd see a gangster in the middle of the smoke-filled room. And that gangster would begin a monologue and tell you, welcome to the Whirlpool Speakeasy, and give you a little history on speakeasies because you might have international guests who don't know what a speakeasy is. But you explain that it was formed in the Prohibition era when alcohol was outlawed. So a speakeasy was somewhere where illegal things happened, and you kept your voices hushed because you didn't want to get caught, right? Cops might know where you were. However, the Whirlpool Speakeasy is somewhere where we comply with the law, and we want to hear your voices. And I'll pass this around. You would also receive one of our period-era Whirlpool Code of Ethics. Great way to use your backlog of materials, right? And inside, you're going to see Prohibition-era drinks and a menu, which is essentially the 3 stations that are set up in the room. So you can do this at no cost. You know, if people have their own feathers and boas and things like that, no cost. And inside of it, you're then going to rotate to each of these stations. The first station is called Calling the Hotline. The second station is What Happens When I Call. And the third station is about building a speak-up culture. And as people go to each station, I'll hand these out so you can see them. As people go to each station, if you've got low budget, you're going to give everybody a drink sticker. Right? A Prohibition-era cocktail. Great job. Thanks for completing your station. All right, rotate to the next one. If you have budget, it can be even more fun. You can have an actual Prohibition-era cocktail. An hors d'oeuvre, right? You can have champagne cocktails. You can have an old-fashioned, all sorts of things like that. So what's great about the event is you can size it to whatever your budget is. What we found, and we've done this twice now, and it's really going viral, you can actually change the stations up depending on your audience and what you need to focus on. It's a really flexible format, and we actually started taking our first Net Promoter Score. Have any of you heard what a Net Promoter Score is? Mm-hmm. For those of you who aren't in product industries, a Net Promoter Score is determining who's your fan base who is really going to promote your products, right? Not just someone who liked it, but says, oh my God, you've got to buy this new stand mixer. It's killer. You can't live without it. So we actually had a survey question in the conference survey asking, how willing are you to recommend this event for others? And it was on a scale to 5 net promoters, usually on a scale of 1 to 10. But 100% of the participants were willing or very willing to recommend the event to others. So our net promoter score was awesome. Questions? We have not yet. The 2 that we've done is internally. But however, the crowd that we did it with in the United States was international. And we didn't find any issues with culture or misconceptions. So it was good. And the other thing, we actually had comments on the survey that we couldn't believe. I can't believe you could make a dry topic so fun and memorable, right? So it's not just about the fun. Mm-hmm. It's about impacting people, changing minds and hearts is how we talk about it. and inducing the behaviors that you want to see.
Is someone at each of the stations then to cover the subject?
It is. Yeah, she asked if there's someone at each station. The answer is yes. So there's a person in period attire as well. I have a list of volunteers, of people who want to help us with these events that you could not believe, and it's quite easy to train them. They could be a lawyer or a non-lawyer. It's pretty simple to operate each station. We've built a script. And people love the chance to be part of something fun and to interact with the leadership or whatever group it is that we're training.
Another question.
Two questions. The first is, how big is Whirlpool? Because this sounds like it's really hard to make it scalable. Of course, if you're a multinational company like we are, but also just getting everybody in the same room.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what do you do with the people who can't come to an event like this? How do they fulfill the training for the year?
Yep, so we target, and what a lot of the training in Whirlpool, we embed into an event that's already going on. So especially like a senior leadership event, or, or if there's a sales and marketing meeting. So already you're not trying to get people to come. They're already there. They're a captured audience, frankly, right? And then you also have the leadership support, build in a role for them as well during the event, and they're partaking. So it's quite easy.
I think to that point, you've got to be very flexible in how you present the same content. So we'll take, we don't use a speakeasy concept, but we'll take, code content, let's say. And in some cases, we'll have site leaders deliver that directly to the workforce in a small group setting. In some cases, we'll distribute that same training as a video, through an LMS. In some settings, I'll lead it as a Jeopardy game. Mm-hmm. But the fundamental is we're teaching the same content. We're just flexing because of the opportunity and the audience that we have.
And frankly, the fact that it's more targeted and in continuing to expand this and scale this, we actually want to go the opposite. We want it to be an invite only. So people are like, did you get an invitation? No, I didn't. What is it? What's it going to be, right? So we want to create that pull, just like you did with the trailers for the code, right? The same thing, so that there's that interest and demand that you can't meet versus, I'm trying to drag 100,000 people to one place. Not possible, right? And there's 5 people that missed it.
And the question in the back of the room there that kind of kicked that off, you asked about specific content or specially designed content. One of the approaches that we've taken is, like I said before, to almost brand the code of conduct, right? And to create hype around that so that people are really interested in understanding that and seeing it. It kind of stands out on its own. It's a different shape. It's got more color. It's more useful than it used to be, right? But then when we get into actual compliance topics, the content of the topic, let's say conflicts of interest, doesn't really change, but the way we wrap it and the way we present it changes dramatically. Mm-hmm. So now when someone receives that training, if it's in person or LMS or however, they're going to recognize it as being a part of the code because it looks and feels and sounds like that training they got previously. And so that's the level of kind of customization that we're doing.
Yeah, and even with the speakeasy format, we incorporate technology. So two of the stations in the speakeasy use a tool called Kahoot, K-A-H-O-O-T. How many of you have heard of it before? Okay, excellent. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a tool that my children's teachers use to test them and help them to study for exams. So the teacher sets up a quiz, and then the kids are able to go online in groups and take this quiz. And there's beer quizzes and golf quizzes and fashion quizzes just to play for fun. And you use your phone to vote your answer. And what's great is in between, there's a leaderboard that shows who's got the most points, who answered it the most quickly, and then it'll show after each question who's in the lead. And I actually, when we're doing training in those sessions, when we stop to say, okay, the Kahoot is done, people go, "Aw," because they're having so much fun. And when, in your last training course, did someone be like, the training stopped?
Yeah.
Right?
You're not going to get that.
Exactly. And it's free. It's easy to use. I'm not a tech person. I was able to figure it out.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great example of using technology to help with compliance and ethics. I mean, using that as a springboard, we've used the M word a few times, and I would like to kind of address that whole issue of millennials. There's a lot of talk about it. I have a few data points. If you research what is unique about millennials, we know that now they make up over a third of the American workforce, people between the ages of 16 and 35, and that they have very high expectations of alignment of their own personal values with the values of their employers, and also that they are the original digital natives. So they expect to be fully engaged in a two-way dialogue around issues. They expect to be able to put forward their views as well as be the passive recipient of information. And one other interesting feature about millennials is that their preferences around training tend to be that they like to learn by taking risks and making mistakes, which in general is perhaps not a bad thing, but in the world of compliance and ethics, I think is something that we might be concerned about. So, I mean, some of these tools that Kim has mentioned, and also things like games and gamification and social learning and user-generated content, are things that are likely to appeal to millennials. And I'm interested to know if you're thinking about or already introducing any of these into your compliance and ethics training.
Sure, maybe I'll take that one. So I do think you have to think about millennials maybe in a special way, but I would actually argue that I think, like going back to the point I made earlier, everybody is so divided in their time, is what I have found. So I think with millennials, you get more traction with media-rich things, shorter, more impactful. So example of what we've started doing, maybe to address this gentleman's question in the back, in terms of other ways, creative ways you can get messaging out. So we started doing these short video and poster series using pop culture to work into or historical figures or music to try to convey a concept in the code of conduct. Mm-hmm. So, for some of the older workforce, they kind of look at it like, I'm not even sure I know who Lady Gaga is or what she's all about. Maybe I've heard the name, but certainly for the millennials, they get traction. But for everyone, they stop and pay attention. And we actually found that for maybe where there was a generational divide and people didn't necessarily connect with the particular video or content, they came and asked questions, what's this all about? And it generated a conversation, which, like any good advertising campaign, you want people to talk, right? That's ultimately what you're trying to do here. So I would say, think about those kind of creative ways. Every workforce is a little bit different. We have workforces in a manufacturing setting, right? So you have to be flexible to Dan's point. Mm-hmm. It's a different environment, but that doesn't mean you can't be a little bit creative, a little bit edgy in how you present the content. And the way we kind of look at it is, your LMS and those things are sort of your baseline. And then you build upon that, different, video tools, email, posters, whatever works for your organization. But the thing that I think is important is you have to have a campaign concept going into it. Otherwise, you're just sort of throwing out a bunch of stuff. So I don't know what others are doing, but that's what we've tried.
I'd say it's similar. We kind of cut the pile in two big groups. There is the mandatory 3 courses a year. We're going to roll it out. We're going to track it. And in that space, we're much more conscientious now about to whom do we roll that out. So we won't just blast it across the entire organization. We'll, probably already do this, but finance and legal and trade will get certain things, and so that we take as kind of like the table stakes. But where the real value is on the other side. And again, watching millennials, in the way that they process information, they'll get, 30 tweets in half an hour and 6 messages from their friends and 14 Snapchats and news feeds and all this and that, right? And if you watch, what happens is they discard half of it, right? They sort of read some of it, and then they really latch on to a bit of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the more that you can kind of feed that, because they process data in such a different way than I do, the more you can feed that, their ability to selectively look and kind of construct an outcome from a lot of data and begin feeding that, I think it's a better way to reach that group. We find it more effective. And then I was struck this morning by the keynote speaker. I've heard this before, right? Hire the millennials based upon your ethics program, that sort of thing, corporate social responsibility. When you put that together with the concept that people join companies and leave bosses, right? Don't ignore the bosses, right? And you have to reach them a little bit differently. But if they're not emulating those values and being responsive to that generation, then you're going to lose that generation. So you have to engage both simultaneously.
Yeah. And Paul, taking back to your comment that millennials want to take risks, right, or see the effect of risks. I'll give you, again, a particular example we did at Whirlpool, which you can do with budget or without budget. We built an app that was called Choose Your Own Experience. And the idea came from when I was little, there were those books that you used to read. It would say, if you want to go through the red door, go to page 6, right? You want to go through the blue door, go to page 9. So it came through that, and we used an internal person to develop it for us, so it didn't cost us anything. And the front of the app had a picture of VP of Finance, manufacturing, HR, right? So you have all your main roles, and you got to choose, who do I want to be? Who do I want to aspire to be? So it had that leadership engagement as well. Then once you picked your role, you had a set of 3 ethical dilemmas that you went through. And there was clearly a wrong choice. But there were 2 right choices. So it wasn't an easy, this is what I'm supposed to do. We made such situations were complex, and they really had to think about what was wrong. And we voluntarily had over 2,000 people complete it in 1 week. And it was so powerful. I love the story of one manager. She came down, took it, because we just had it out during lunch, and we'd say to people, hey, come take this, play our game. And one manager took it, went back up, got her entire team, and said, sit down and complete all 6 adventures. Right? Now, there was a KitchenAid stand mixer prize involved as well. I'm sure it had some impact, but what people told us is they felt like it was a really safe way for them to push the edge, right? So not just the millennials, but to take risks and experience the impact of that risk without feel like they were actually being tested, and I think it was across the board a favorable experience for people.
Fantastic. I mean, the message that is coming across very clearly is, it sounds to me like a move away from our traditional kind of 100% sheep dip defensibility model to something that is more flexible, more sort of choosing the right experience for the right group. But also alongside that, we know that there is a real concern now coming right from the DOJ about effectiveness and measuring the effectiveness of your compliance program. When you add that kind of complexity to the program, I'm the last person to say that I believe completion equals compliance. It doesn't. Just measuring completions is not good enough, but how do you measure the effectiveness of these more sophisticated programs? How do you know it's working?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. We look at it, and admittedly, we all face the same thing. We look at it and say, we're going to still deliver traditional training in a much more limited set. We're going to create interest, really, through all these other forms of communication and education. We do monitor, helpline calls, of course, and we use that as justification. We monitor, of course, the types of issues that we see. But I would say, being brutally honest, we haven't really cracked that nut yet. We're still working through that.
Yeah, I think effectiveness is always the hardest question, right? How do you measure it? Two things that we just started doing last year is in every in-person presentation we do, we have metrics that we track for leadership participation and a knowledge check. The leadership participation, we believe, furthers effectiveness because you no longer have a leader standing over here saying, hit your goals, and us standing over here saying, but do them the right way, right? It's a unified message, and this way we think it's more effective and more powerful. And sometimes a business person speaking on compliance for 1 minute can be more effective than any of us speaking for an hour, right? The second thing we do is we've started doing knowledge checks, some with the Kahoot tool, which you can actually record. And what's great, because the Kahoot tool is visual, not only do you see if the audience is getting it, the leader sees if the audience is getting it. So that if they're missing things, you're going to have that leader's support to say, hey, there's more work that needs to be done here.
Seth, any?
Yeah, so we do a lot of the similar things. I mean, we employee engagement surveys, look at all the various programmatic data. Net Promoter Score is something we're playing around with a little bit, trying to learn that from the marketing folks. But I think it is really challenging. To some extent, I think the way we kind of approach it is we want the team that's on the field, to use a sports analogy, to be as prepared as possible. So a lot of what we spent a lot of time, and this has been in the last, I would say, year and a half, really trying to listen more than to speak. So we spent a lot of time with the commercial organization and others to say, okay, help us understand where you're at in terms of the knowledge continuum. Some people, are in the the third level class. Others need the first level class, and I think you can also get a sense of how prepared are people to confront the challenges. Do they know where to go? So it's a little bit of a soft thing, I know, but I would encourage you to spend some time in some listening sessions to really try and gauge where is your team at, and we approach it from a risk standpoint. So we focused on the areas in the organization we thought were the highest risk, and then you kind of work backwards. So I'm not sure there's necessarily for the statisticians in the audience, I don't know that you can really crunch those numbers, but I think you can get a qualitative sense of where your organization is at on the maturity curve.
Some questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Speaking a lot about technology and training and LMS, sort of in-person meetings, what about companies that have a large hourly workforce?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you used any specific methods that you recommend for training?
I mean, I'll give you an example that we've tried. So we do a couple different things. I mean, I think first of all, you have to understand what's the message and the issues for that workforce. So I'm not going to spend time, at least in because we have a lot of hourly workers in manufacturing plants. We're not going to talk to them about FCPA. It's just not relevant. They're not going to understand it. It's wasting time. So we focus on what are the issues in those settings, and to some extent you can look at your helpline and other things to get a sense, talk to HR. But we've really pushed the management in those facilities to be the face of it.
Yep.
Because what I found is if I come in, I might be there, we have 80 manufacturing facilities all over the world. If I spent my entire life traveling around the world, I might only see that facility once or twice in a couple of years. So I think you have to build an impactful sort of communication toolkit is what we've done, and force them to be in front of the workforce, which I can tell you has been a little bit challenging because of what I found is, their first question is, where's the PowerPoint? Well, I didn't provide a PowerPoint because I want you to actually talk to people. What do you mean you want me to talk to people? Yeah, I want you actually to think about the content and how to make it relevant to your workforce in Poland or Mexico or wherever. And at least for an hourly workforce, that's what we've done. I don't know what others.
Yeah. Similarly, we discovered when we rolled out the code that the site supervisors and the managers of the direct labor force, we have about 5,000 direct labor employees, they want material. These people are having regular meetings, at least monthly, sometimes more frequently with their work groups, and they're always looking for more material. I liken it to when I was a Cub Scout leader, right? And I'd have den meetings on Monday night, and on Monday morning I'd be scrambling around. What am I going to do with these kids at 6 o'clock that night, right? It's the same philosophy,
true,
right?
yeah.
They want, in our organization, they want the content. So we prepare them with that content. What we've gone to recently is doing a quarterly. I talked before about aligning all these communications with cross comms and L&D and ethics and compliance. So we've started producing a quarterly, basically 8.5 by 11, talking points sheet that gets distributed to all the site leaders, and there's no expectation or no requirement that they'll utilize that, but it's there for them to utilize. And we're finding that by and large they do. They value that. They give them something to talk about, and they just go and use it.
Yeah. I agree. Your safety huddles, if you have a manufacturing environment like Whirlpool does, is a great way to drop that material in. Yeah. It's easy, quick. They can cover it. And sometimes if it's an important enough topic, we'll give the manager a sheet to take attendance as well if we want a record that it was communicated. So there's ways. Other things we've done is, again, we brought Compliance Week to the manufacturing environment in some instances. And one of my favorite stories is we laid confidential information around the facility, right? It was false, but it's like somebody left something on a... Yeah, exactly. Fake news. We left fake news. And then when you turned it over, it said, congrats, call so-and-so or email so-and-so and put it back where you found it so someone else can play. And there was a third shift supervisor who found the material, and she sent one of my team back this email basically playing the game and berating him, not berating, coaching, I should say. Dear Alex, I found your coaching and performance plan for Sue on the printer. This is really not behavior I expected of you. As a leader of Whirlpool, you're supposed to live and lead the Whirlpool values. Please focus on this more seriously in the future and be the example that we need you to be. Incredible. So we celebrated that in front of the entire management team of the plant and showcased her, and it was a great moment for everyone.
Fantastic. There was another question here.
I know we've talked a lot about kind of creating this type of buzz about the code of conduct.
Mm-hmm.
If any of you could speak to the new code of conduct, what you're seeing, are you still doing print? Is it all just electronic, digital apps, hyperlinks? Kind of, if there's any new thoughts on how to upgrade the code to really do the millennial engagement?
I think it's a whole session.
You guys go
first.
first, because you...
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So we did just do our code of conduct in 2016. And so, totally built it from the ground up, made sure that it fit the culture, did a lot of work up front with focus groups. What does it mean? What do you want it to mean? I was telling these guys before, one bit of feedback that we got early on was someone said, I want the code to be a book that I can take home and put on my coffee table, and it will represent for my family what I do. I was like, wow. If we can achieve that, then I'm done. I retire, whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Powerful.
And so we spent a lot of time with that and structured it appropriately for our organization and how we're trying to create accountability and teamwork. Okay, so you have that to begin with. As far as distribution goes, we distribute hard copy only to new employees and to acquisitions, which we consider new employees. And we make sure that every break room in every facility has a couple of copies available. For the entire balance of the workforce, it's available electronically, and it's available print on demand. I do keep copies in my office because sometimes it's just really good to give them out. Oh, the other place we put them in hard copy is in every lobby of every facility. Did that address it? Was there another?
Yeah, I think just as far as the actual content, if there's any, is it more interactive with kind of question and answer sessions that you could do electronically, or is it just hyperlinks and tabs?
It's very real for us. So we're working towards interactive. We're not there yet. But as far as the content itself, we put in the dirty examples. We flipped them to the positive side, but that the real things that happen to us and with us. So that's all there. And then the interactive piece, I guess, is really, obviously the simple links out to policy, simple links out to reporting, simple links out to my email, that sort of thing. Yeah. Then we have there's a lot of opportunity there yet.
Yeah, I mean, we did something similar. In the interest of time, I don't want to go too far into that, but a similar approach. I mean, some things that we have tried, definitely more media rich. The approach we took when we must have been doing the same project at the same time. It's a values-based document, and we structured it in the way of how people do their work. So we talk to them, interacting with your team members, interacting with the customer. So you're not just presenting it. Well, let's talk about FCPA. Let's talk about conflicts of interest. That's not how I think about it, and certainly not how the workforce thinks about it. They think about it in the context of how they get their work done and the business strategy. So we did that. On the interactive, I mean, we've tried some things we're still working on where you have links to videos that are little vignettes on examples in your code of conduct of maybe a conflict of interest scenario, links to policies, things like that. So we're still building that, and I think it is helpful. It depends on your workforce, but certainly for those that maybe are more media savvy, we've found good results from that.
So we are 5 minutes over time, but I'm going to take one more question.
Just a quick question. Have any of you used interactive audience participation technology such as Slido in order to tap into questions that are live in the room when you're doing that training?
As in I'm just collecting questions or asking them questions?
Well, it's a way you can either poll the audience in real time. What do you all think about this?
Yeah.
Put it up on the screen. People use their mobile devices to vote and respond to a poll, or they can submit questions themselves directly to you when you're facilitating a session. And
we've done that.
Or vote on questions that are submitted by other people in the room.
Yeah, we've used that in these summits I was talking about. We use that there. So
we wanted to use it here, just
so
you know.
It's a little bit difficult, but it is. So we'll do scenarios, put together scenarios, and then you can see the bar chart in real time moving across the screen. It's interesting. Not only does it create a lot of discussion in the room, but it creates a little bit of an edge of competition, which no matter what country I've been in, people are all competitive. So I think it is an effective tool. I've not used it the other way around to sort of necessarily solicit questions from the audience, but I'm sure you could do that.
Yeah, Kahoot, the tool I was talking about before, has that polling feature as well. And Whirlpool is a Google company, and so in Google we can do that real time, people submitting questions and showing polling and popularity as well.
And I think mobile has been a huge enabler for that, because it used to be that you used to have these polling devices and equipment. All of that is gone now. You just give someone a web link and it works.
And we've done it on a limited basis where you're putting scenarios out and then saying, which of these following 5 actions do you think is the appropriate course of action, and done it with pretty good success. Actually, you get decent feedback, right? And then it creates that teaching opportunity.
Okay, so we are over time, and I am going to have to stop there. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I would just like to say thank you so much to Dan, Kim, and Seth for a brilliant session. Thanks, everybody.